Hello, everybody. Welcome at another evening within the public lecture series of the ECM master program, Educating, Curating, Managing, based at the University of Applied Arts. And we are super happy to welcome with us guests from Budapest, Hajnalka Somogyi and Nicolette Eres. So great to have you with us tonight. And the two of them will talk and present the OFF-Biennale in Budapest, one of the largest independent contemporary art event in Hungary that was launched in 2014 in a situation that is, as I guess everybody knows, very difficult within the local scene regarding cultural politics and politics in general. And it's a great endeavor and very important reference project for us to also present tonight to you within its curatorial approaches and its framework. So we are super happy to have you tonight with us, and you will talk under the title "Fake It Till You Make It," which is quite telling, I guess, about the OFF-Biennale in general, but also about this year's event that is planned to take place very soon, end of April, and is planned to take till end of May. I will just shortly introduce the two of you. Nicolette Eres is a curator based in Budapest. After years of working for many institutions of the Budapest art scene, Trafo Gallery, Ludwig Museum, she joined the curatorial team of OFF-Biennale Budapest in 2014. She was a lecturer at the Academy of Fine Arts and co-editor of the online magazines xindex.hu and mesofera.org. Currently, she, besides her engagement at OFF-Biennale, she is a co-curator and head of programming. She is a co-curator and head of programming. She works for Budapest Gallery. And Hajnalka Somogyi is a curator, also a curator based in Budapest. And since 2014, she has worked as a leader and co-curator of Biennale Budapest, which she initiated. In 2013 to 14, she was editor of artmagazine.hu. And between 2009 and 2012, she was a curator at Ludwig Museum of Contemporary Art in Budapest. And before that, between 2001 and 2006 at Trafo House of Contemporary Art in Budapest. She co-founded the independent art initiatives Dynamo and Impacts, which are both based in Budapest. So welcome again. As I said before, OFF-Biennale is a very important reference project for us within our program, but also in our discourse series. So we are very happy to have you with us tonight. And I hand over to you, Hajnalka and Nicolette.
Thank you so much, Luisa, for the introduction. Good evening for everyone. We decided to share this opportunity with Nicolette, and we are really happy to be here and appreciate the possibility to speak about the project to you. So I will start. I will speak for like around 20 minutes and I will introduce the project, the aims, the structure, the model, a little bit of its history and of course its context. And then Nicolette will present you the upcoming edition, which is the third edition that we are opening within 1 month on the 23rd of April, sorry. So yes, as Luisa just said, OFF-Biennale is indeed an international contemporary art event, which is the largest civil, independent and state-free, as we say it, arts initiative in Hungary. It's organized on a grassroots basis by a micro association. And so it started as a garage biennale, basically, that is based on self-organization and a collaboration of many players, of artists, curators, art and civil organizations, galleries, scholars, students, and many other people. Actually, I see two colleagues in the audience as well. Eszter Szakács is also a member of our curatorial team, and Judith Salipsky, she was here. I don't know where she is now. Anyways, she's one of the curators. So it's a large group of people. I actually also have a little presentation to you. OFF-Biennale boycotts the Hungarian art infrastructure. It doesn't apply for state funding and also steers clear from state-run art institutions. The main aim of the project is to strengthen the local independent art scene and to take part in the social discourse on urgent but often suppressed issues. And with the whole project to strengthen the culture of democracy by the means of art and also by its own workings. So OFF is a grassroots civil endeavor, and we don't have a stable sustaining institution, foundation, or like a large corporate sponsor behind us. We don't have any employees. There's no collaboration with the city or the state. So this is kind of peculiar for a biennale, we could say, or for that matter, for any kind of large-scale international art event, especially in Eastern Europe, where the private sector in contemporary art, well, is quite weak, let's say. And there is no culture of private sponsorship. And still, for us, this was exactly the point, to restart our activities on a civil ground and to base it in self-organization. So why we did that? That's the question. And why are we organizing a biennale in the middle of Europe, where such festivals abound anyways? So in order to answer that, we have to look very quickly into the political, social context of the biennale, and also to make a little distinction between the civic and the civil. So basically, I think it's a very useful distinction, especially for us. So civic space is a place that is established or has taken root in policies, education programs, regulations, and laws. So this would be like the universities, the hospitals, the museums of like public life, basically. While the civil space is a space that remains fluid, a place where positions still have to be taken up or created. That is basically people and organizations that try to answer social needs that are not properly acknowledged or represented in the civic domain. So the civil is there to make up for something that is missing, to serve some goal that is not acknowledged institutionally or officially yet. And I take this from this book, Philippe Detachmers and Pascal Guillen's The Art of Civil Action. So that's been useful for us when kind of defining what we've been doing here. Yeah, once again, we have to go a little bit into what's been happening in the country in the past 10 years. So as in any European country, of course, contemporary art in Hungary has long been part of the civic domain, which means that the social need for it has been acknowledged. So there are museums there, well, the Ludwig Museum for contemporary art, there is the Kunsthalle, and there are other institutions that are to serve this scene, this area. And actually, there is hardly anything that is outside the state-run or municipally run art system. So why we moved out of it, basically, as my colleagues and I used to work within that system, and we had quite good positions in them. So since 2010, as probably most of you know, the coalition of the party Fidesz and the Christian Democratic People's Party took over the country from a discredited socialist, so-called socialist leadership. And since then, the very profound changes have rearranged the country. So there has been a centralization of the public institutional system that has placed institutions under very strict political control. There was a new constitution that was introduced in 2012 that was written without parliamentary or public debate. And this became the beginning of this dismantling of democratic checks and balances. A new media law limiting the freedom of the press, the almost total takeover of both the public and commercial media, and the appointment of loyal leaders in national authorities and public institutions kind of cemented this or furthered this agenda. So despite the increasing opacity of governmental actions and networks, in the past years, the government's agenda of cementing its own power and thus the road to wealth for a very narrow circle of friends and supporters has become quite clear, partly due to EU investigations. So a very loyal and very powerful, this is one of the civil protests against these processes. So a very loyal and powerful oligarchy has been established through the redistribution of public money. Newly implemented regulations compromise civil rights and intimidate and hinder civil and political opposition. Corrupted authorities such as the tax office, the police, the court of auditors, or the prosecution act to discourage political opponents. And the state-owned media and the overwhelming majority of commercial media function as a government propaganda machine. And so since 2018, these so-called Article 7 mechanisms are in place against Hungary. That could end up in Hungary losing its voting rights, but this investigation is ongoing. So that's like the large picture of the political situation. And of course, parallel to the demonization of incoming and passing refugees and migrants, there has been also a systematic stigmatization and financial encumbering of organized civil action. So civil organizations, and especially those fighting for human and democratic rights, have been officially referred to as internal enemy paid by foreign powers. And so this kind of fear-mongering combined with identifying the inner enemy, which is basically part of the civil sector, while the enemy outside would be like the migrants and Brussels, as it's called. So all this lays perfect grounds for censorship and more broadly to a wide-ranging social acceptance of political dominance of public discourse and governmental control over free expression. What do I have here? Yeah, these are just some of the campaigns. We don't have really time to go into it. So talking about the art scene, very similar things happened. We don't really have time for this. So centralization was also implemented in the art sector with the appointment of politically loyal leaders. And there were quite some protests against these processes. Once again, you can see some images in here that basically didn't yield any results. This is the newest one. Probably you heard about it. This is very recent. The protest against the changing of the model, basically the privatization of the University of Theatre and Film. That created a really strong reaction. Maybe in the discussion section we can go into it. So getting back to this idea of why working in the civil field, basically this is the same that we can say in our case, that the public infrastructure basically failed the art scene. And by now most public institutions cannot provide an uncompromising ground for professional work and collaboration. And so therefore we decided to create our own platform to work together. So it is a civil action in as much as it kind of makes up for a lack that we've been feeling. Iliska, ki kell menned. I'm sorry, my kid is here with me, and my arrangement of the two kids working together doesn't seem to work. Nem. So the idea with the Biennale was that by gathering independent energies that were still out there in 2014, and by the political act of giving these efforts a common name, so OFF-Biennale, we can make them more visible. we can amplify these efforts. And so it was a way and a form to facilitate fundraising, and also a way to reach out internationally. Légy szíves, menjél ki, jó, és játsszál. And it was quite clear from the beginning that we must boycott the state and its infrastructure, which has many reasons. One being this kind of vulnerability of the scene that was caused by the lack of any alternative in funding. So when you have no alternative but the state-run infrastructure and state funding, I mean, there is obviously there has been always international money and some private money, but in a very, very small degree. So this makes you very vulnerable once the government decides to kind of change the rules of the game. So that was one reason to look out and find some alternatives in funding. And another important reason has been to show that it is possible to avoid the negative compromises that state subsidies usually entail, like self-censorship, and still create a large-scale international project that at that time, like early 2014, seemed impossible. So it was very important that we establish such examples in this traditionally top-down and very demoralized society, in which accepting these new rules of the game seemed to be the only conceivable or realistic option for most people. It still is. So this example has been very important. And so with this Biennale, we wanted to create a frame where the production of critical art is possible. We wanted to create alliances among the stakeholders of art locally, but also to create connections with non-artistic civil organizations. Also, it was a way to create an audience that can provide social legitimation for what we've been doing, and also to create international partnerships to activate our network through or from this platform. So ever since the Biennale has worked in a very nomadic way, 22 or 30% comes from Hungarian private sources, and the rest comes from international foundations and sponsors. And there has been an immense amount of volunteer and pro bono professional work in the project, the proportion of which is slowly but surely decreasing. It's important that we don't want to and we cannot base our activities to such voluntary work, but it still has an important role. So the first edition was presented in May 2015, exactly 6 years ago, with almost 200 programs in around 100 venues, artists from 22 countries, and 35,000 visits in 5 weeks. So it was really big. It didn't have a thematic frame. We asked people to bring anything that they deem urgent and relevant in this situation. And we wanted to be very inclusive because through the size and the diversity of the program, we basically demonstrated the civil energies and the perseverance for ourselves and for the audience. So it was like a defibrillation of the scene. While 2 years later, in 2017, the Biennale was in October, it was already smaller and more focused. There was a larger focus on new production, because we realized that this is something that is increasingly lacking in the system in general. And we did have a thematic frame because we wanted to focus on certain discourses and make our voice heard and create discourse. The title was Gaudiopolis 2017, the City of Joy, that referred to a children's republic that was founded in the aftermath of the Second World War in Budapest. And so our program became much more coherent and politically also much more straightforward. The story of this children's republic, Gaudiopolis, which means the City of Joy, offered a frame to reassess the implications of assuming civil responsibility, personal commitment, care, solidarity, education, community development, and the sustainability of democracy, as well as it gave a possibility to rethink in this context the potential role of children, of playfulness, of joy, and of art, last but not least. Today, we can say that what started as a protest action, like a critical mass type of demonstration, has become a platform for art and civil engagement. What we learned from this process is that creating a structure is essential in order to make change. The Biennale model still works for us because it allows us to concentrate our energies and funding, both of which are being very scarce, and to raise attention and to strengthen our visibility locally as well as internationally. At the same time, there are some very important features that distinguish OFF-Biennale from, let's say, mainstream biennales. So instead of this kind of festival or like fireworks model where you know, a new group of people come in and create something very visible and basically burn a couple of million euros in like a couple of months, we really prefer local anchor and continuity, and more so, which means that we concentrate more and more on long-term production, long-term collaborations. Nicolette will speak about it more. Most of the projects that we took on for this third edition have been present even before the collaboration with OFF-Biennale. So these are groups, collaborations that have already existed and will exist after our collaboration, and some of them we will bring on even after this edition and keep working with these people, and probably do something even for the next Biennale with them. Also, it seems that this long-term engagement will probably break the rhythm of the Biennale in the longer term. And the other thing which is important for us is that instead of growing our own infrastructure, we prefer growing our network and work in collaboration with many different actors. And probably this leads us to my final point, which is our networks that we established in the past years. We are part of two international networks. One is the so-called East Europe Biennial Alliance, which is a regional collaboration, and we were one of the co-founders, together with the Kiev Biennial, the Matter of Art Biennale in Prague, the Warsaw Biennale, and also the Survival Kit by the Center of Contemporary Art in Riga. And the other collaboration that we've been invited to recently is the so-called Lumbung Interlocal network that was established by Ruan Grupa in the framework of the upcoming Documenta 15, which will give us the possibility not only to contribute to Documenta next year, or I don't know if it will happen next year, but also to establish a long-term collaboration with the other 13 organizations that are part of Lumbung Interlocal. And so the goal here is to develop a new model of sustainability, a common ecosystem for these organizations. So we are very excited about that. So with all these new opportunities and with these large scale and long-term projects at hand, I guess it's obvious that right now sustainability that presents the largest challenge for us. And so we have a lot on our plate. Actually, we have to reorganize and strengthen our working structure. These are all things after we do the Biennale right now. We also have to create more solid financial grounds for our activities. And this latter point gives us a lot of thinking, besides networking and all this collaboration that will provide some kind of financial, well, possibilities or a relative security. We also would like to develop certain services that generate income to the association. We'd like to tap the resource in crowdfunding that we haven't done very much so far, which will necessitate a different kind of communication, a more continuous communication. We would like to reorganize our friends circle that has been a very important well, element of our financial portfolio, but we hope it will be even more important. And also there is the possibility that we are considering to form collaborations with oppositional democratic municipalities. So that's a big change then, that since 2019, where we had the last municipal elections, some of the more important cities, among them Budapest, has got mayors from the political opposition. And this creates a new situation, because actually working parallel to the infrastructure and not having connections and not having collaboration with the infrastructure is not something that we consider healthy or good in any ways. According to our principles, collaboration is something that is the basis of any kind of effective work. So this new political system obviously makes us thinking about these possibilities, and Nicolette will probably also mention some of the little changes that have already happened in the program. So thank you so much. I will give the floor now to Nicolette.
Thank you, Hanneke, for this really interesting introduction.
Oh, I forgot
into
to change the image. I'm sorry. I forgot. These are just these are just a couple of images.
Would you like to comment on them? We still have time if you would like to do that.
No. Well, this would have been just background, but I forgot to push the button. So here, I mean, with these images, you can basically see like the variety of our sites. We work in like industrial spaces and empty shops and independent little theater spaces, let's say. This is like a community cultural house. On the street, obviously, this is the Open Society Archives, which is usually the center, like a heart chakra of our Biennale. But this year it will be only an online project because of the virus. And yeah, this is my last image, which is the design of the third edition, but it's a Hungarian image. So Nicolette will have a better one, I guess. So that's all.
Thank you, Hanneke, for this really great insight into the structure of Biennale. And I think we will discuss it later on. I would hand over to Nicolette, and after your presentation, we have the opportunity for questions, discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here today. Yes, I am the one to introduce a bit more the third edition of the biennial and to provide some insights to some of the projects. And I would like to emphasize that due to time limitation and other aspects, I won't cover all the projects in my presentation. It's rather to introduce the very thematic of the biennial and to provide kind of a teaser for you. So if you can make to join us in May, then you will still a lot to discover. So I also share my screen with you. So this is the English version of what you have just seen in Hungarian. This is the title of the third edition. As Hanneke mentioned, at this time we decided not to think of the biennial as an umbrella, but rather as a frame which is a bit narrow and focused, and we also realized that we have to invest more in production. So we decided to work with a limited number of projects, but work with them on long term, which due to COVID is more than 2 years now, but it was not intentional. But definitely, so it's a long-term collaboration with the project, and we also invest a lot in finding a proper or at least a sufficient financial basis for the project, which is also something to be improved, but at least we can start this collaboration with them, and with quite a number of them we intend to work long term. So as you see, the title of this third edition is Inhale. it's centered around the very act of respiration. Inhale can be read as a call and an exclamation, a request and a cry. The title was inspired by a well-known poem of the early 1930s written by a great Hungarian poet, Attila József. Inhale implies various issues of our current reality, the condition of the air we breathe, the consequences of the climate change, but it also refers the air around us. It's also about the space we share and the commons we jointly own. The project of OFF-Biennale relates to this metaphoric notion of respiration in various ways, though it was not a thematic set in advance as part of the open call what we have, but rather a frame that we find after seeing the project development more detailedly. And it's the bonding between the projects and the space they jointly accommodate. Besides ecological understanding, it also alludes to the social reality and political climate that we are part of. In the midst of evolving and extending oppressive regimes, it is a claim for freedom and liberation of the oppressed, both in an individual and on a collective level. The Black Lives Matter movement gave an avoidable overtone to this title, recalling the last words of those people who died in police custody recently and later. Later, the arriving of the COVID-19 pandemic has further enriched the sad actuality of the title. The reference to the symptoms of the disease and the dramatic changes the pandemic caused in all our lives render it, I mean COVID, a major character of the current edition. Despite the postponement of the biennial from spring 2020 to this year, the situation remained similarly fragile. Now, less than a month before the opening, we are still a lot of amongst us a lot of uncertainty and doubt. As you may guess, we have scenarios covering various forms of hybridity. As a consequence of our policy of staying away from state-run institutions, the venues of the exhibitions are more flexible, basically empty shops and pop-up possibilities, and thus can be secured better than museums and art institutions of a larger scale. But of course, we also have to adapt to the lockdown regulations, which quite rapidly change according to the situation. So here I present you a few episodes of the biennial without attempting to be comprehensive, so that you still have many projects to discover, either online or offline. As a common denominator, the projects presented in the frame of the Biennale do not only point to various problems, they go beyond criticism and deliver utopic, playful, or tangible proposition and alternatives. So that was the major point of the call, what we sent out in 2019, that we look for a forward-looking project which takes a step beyond criticism and offer something, if not a complete plan of action as such, then at least some idea that is able to free our mind and take a step further our daily constraints. So they encourage all of us to take a deep breath and get to work in order to preserve and create those conditions and places where breathing freely is still possible. Inhale refers to the freedom of thinking and envisioning the future differently than the current circumstances would predict. asking if we can grasp the planetary ecological crisis through local issues, the artist group X-Provium presents the agency for climate imaginary. You can see the first image here. In the shadow of the climate crisis and the exploitation of the ecosystem, a dominant constraint of our social imagination is being imposed, which seriously limits our capacities to imagine the future differently. In order to unleash the social imagination, seeking a way out of the climate crisis, ingrained thought patterns must be discarded. And I think this is one of the most important points of all of the project. This this free air amongst the very old and already tried way of thinking, what occasionally leads us to nowhere. So this art research group, X-Provium, indicates a research institute that, during the biennial, where art and science will meet to let some fresh air into our thoughts through inviting primarily local artists, but through the satellite project, it will extend to a more international level. A similar attempt to, this still goes to X-Tro. So a similar attempt to imagine the future differently than the extension of the present leads to another scientific artistic research community, which is named Aerosane, a collaboration between the meteorology researchers of the MIT and the artist Thomas Saraceno. It envisions our life after the fossil fuel depletion, when we need to imagine travel while cooperating with natural forces. A floating sculpture made collectively with the use of assembled plastic bags will float over Budapest in case the atmospheric conditions will be favorable, demonstrating how climate and social imagination can be freed in the course of a collective endeavor. We work with school children to realize the balloon from used plastic bags that will travel across the sky by using thermodynamics as a driving force. And besides the project that raise ecological issues and talk about social ones, through them, OFF-Biennale will present a number of initiatives that more directly deal with social and political phenomena of our current reality. To start with probably the most peculiar, in a sense, one that has the capacity to make us unsure of the applicability of the political language we sometimes unreflectively use, is the Hungaro-futurist movement. As contemporary nationalist and far-right ideologies have hijacked our cultural narratives, national and historical myths, not only the language remained defenseless, but consequently our political imagination as well. So Hungaro-futurism is an alternative concept of what it means to be Hungarian, directly inspired by Afrofuturism and various other ethnofuturist movements. This initiative is about to unmask the toolkits of nationalist appropriation by staying away from being didactic and serious up to a level when humor evaporates. It aims to reimagine narratives of origin that restore hope in the future. New mythologies are being created that confuses our perception of national and individual identity and give new, forward-looking meaning to historical sites, monuments, and memories. The aim of the publication that will launch in the frame of the biennial Xenotopia, and an international conference that is also a Hungaro-futurist contribution to OFF-Biennale. So the aim is to reclaim for progressive thoughts the aesthetic and political monopoly of shaping collective memories of the past and possible visions of the future. The Xenotopia magazine, this is an English language publication. So the magazine and also the conference will explore Hungaro-futurism in relation with such contemporary ethno-futurist initiatives that have evolved in semi-peripheries of similar social and cultural positions. Connected to the publication is a one-day symposium, as I mentioned. It's co-organized with the Vienna-based collective Adaptive. Hungarian and international contemporary art professionals, theoreticians, and researchers will present and discuss alternative future vision, concepts, and phenomena that may help to restore our hope in future. That will be online as most of the discursive project of the biennial, so feel free to follow. Another project exploring inter-peripheral relations analyzes whether we can talk about the shared colonial history of Eastern Europe and the Global South. It's titled the Trans-Periphery Movement. Asking if Hungarian settlers in Latin America, Cuban migrant workers in Hungary, and Afro-Asian students, if we can find a common history, if they have a historical background where what they can share. The research project that now will have a chapter in the form of an exhibition, as it's also a long-term project, as many of the ones that we present in the frame of the biennial. So it presents archivic material as well as contemporary artworks. It puts forward a multifocal perspective that inquires relations between Eastern Europe and the Global South, and also probes what this relation means from the perspective of the Global South. This one is a less represented one at this part of the globe, and is performed through artworks either commissioned for this occasion or selected on this basis. This is one of the new commissions, an artwork by Monica de Miranda. The Trans-Periphery project will also have a conference as an accompanying program on the 27th and 29th of May. So besides Hungaro-futurism and the Trans-Periphery movement, there is another initiative presented in the frame of the biennial that strongly builds on the revision of nation-based identity politics and the challenge of the ruling cultural canon. It is the project Roma MoMA that raises questions about the potential contemporary Roma art museum that breaks with the prerequisites of a classical museum based on a strong will to negotiate and construct meanings of national identity. As museums have a significant contribution in developing our understanding of national or ethnical identity, the question is, how shall a museum of contemporary Roma art look like? By whom shall it be initiated, negotiated, and maintained? As Roma identity transcends borders of nation states, the project also urges dialogue across nations and peripheries. This is a collaboration with the Berlin-based initiative named ERIAC, the European Roma Institute for Art and Culture, and is being realized with the involvement of local and international Roma and non-Roma artists, cultural experts, museums, and the civil sphere. So do not imagine a museum hosted by a physical building. Roma MoMA is prefiguratively creates itself. The focus is not on the realization of the institution, but the very act of performing a conception. Fake it till you make it, I would say. This is especially true in the project of, in the case of this project. So amongst the program of Roma MoMA, we find reading theater based on the heritage of one of the best known Roma women artists who passed away last year, Omara, alongside an exhibition of her works, a street performance, a punk opera by an independent theater group, open-air installation, as well as the first presentation of a seminal work of Roma painting, the huge panel picture of Tamás Péri titled Birth. It is from 83, and this work, it is a giant painting of 42 square meters. It was made for the children's home at the Andrássy Castle in Tiszadob, a small town at the northeast of Hungary. The mythical allegory of the birth of the Roma. Here you see Kali goddess giving birth to her child, the human Manus. So this at an orphanage meant really something important for those children who live there without their family, as members of one of the most oppressed communities, minority group in Hungary. In 2011, when the castle was privatized and turned into a luxury wellness hotel, the painting was cut into 4 and transported to a nearby museum of the town of Nyíregyháza, where it is still hosted, properly packed, but still stored in a corridor. In the frame of OFF-Biennale, this painting of central importance will be transported to the Budapest History Museum that is located in the Buda Castle and installed temporarily there at the so-called Baroque Hall, which is a highly representative room of the museum. You might know the castle is a contested site, the center of the government's demonstration to rewrite history through rebuilding, or I would rather say faking of historical monument. This might be another example of fake it till you make it. However, I hope that they won't make it. So they rebuilding long vanished building, and the clearing of historic buildings from the cultural and scientific institution also happening here with a great force, be it the National Library or an academic research center, and the symbolic concentration of power as more and more governmental institutions are moved to the castle. So this is where we will present this enormous Roma painting, the first time ever for the wider public. Rendering visible all its, so these are just small details of the painting, all its wounds, and the fact that it was cut, it will be intentionally not fitted together, leaving a narrow, so visible gap between the pieces. The painting will perform its past and present, and the various discursive programs will address the painting's future. So it is a true collaboration between many actors, from the initiator of the project till various Roma intellectuals, the team of the biennial, invited experts, and so on, not to forget the National Heritage Protection Ltd, And hopefully this project will open when the museums can also open, so maybe a little bit later than other projects of the biennial. Yeah, unfortunately, this time we cannot go into deeper into project, but each of them will be surrounded by various discursive events. But there is still one I would like to shortly mention, because it represents a perspective that we also strongly support, and that is women's contribution to society and the formation of the future. This is the project titled News Medley, a collaboration between the London-based Polish visual artist Alicia Rogalska, curator Katalin Erdődy, and folk singer Réka Annus, and the women's choir of Kartal, a village near Budapest in eastern Hungary. Building on the rich folklore tradition of the region, the members of the choir and the initiators of the project had selected and rewritten songs from the repertoire of the choir in order to talk about their life on the countryside from the perspective of various generations of women. At the time when media landscape is increasingly centralized and controlled by the governmental communication machine, the medley takes this long forgotten tradition of vernacular culture to express the pressing issues and emotions of the current moment. So they take folk songs as medium to give, to provide news of their local reality in other channels than the well-known and controlled one. So the result of this collaboration with the choir will be shown at the biennial in the form of an exhibition, including 2 video works and the publication, and a series of performances on public space with the participation of the members of the choir. Besides these mentioned projects, we have quite some more to follow. Unfortunately, I cannot present you all of them. We have a great project by the curator collective Bureau Imaginaire, and this is about the future of alimentation. And we also will present another one by the PAD Association, which is titled Everyday Shortcomings. It's about the shortcomings of the public services and how they, however, in a forced but rather creative way, give space to new inventions locally. So these are the small chapters of the biennial, what I intended to present you. And I would encourage you to follow the biennial's webpage, the events and the talks, conferences, and various events we will have during these 5 weeks. Hopefully, we will be able to organize at least a part of them offline. But of course, a great number of projects will be online as well. So thank you very much for your attention. And if I may
thank you.
We still have.
Thank you, Nicolette, and thank you, Heineke, for both your presentations that are super interesting, and I think somehow very much connect with each other. As Heineke mentioned, that you are striving to have long-term relationships and collaborations. And I think the examples that you presented, Nicolette, somehow really mirror that approach. So I would be, before we go into the questions from the audience, I would be interested in the curatorial process, because Nicolette, you mentioned that there was an open call with this thematic framework, so to say, that was set by you, I guess. But I would be interested if it's if how you chose the projects for this edition, and if there was also if there are also collaborations that you directly addressed besides the open call process, or how you put the program together would be interesting.
We published the open call in 2019. It had a 18. Yeah, 18. That was so yeah. Yeah, and though it didn't have a thematic frame, it expressed this intention that we look forward projects that have a strong vision of the future and exceeding this this level of criticism what we are so well accommodated to. And we invited an independent jury, and we worked together with them during the selection process, and we together with the jury selected those projects what we are still working with. And of course the formation of some of the projects changed, and I wonder if, but yeah, basically they are what we started to work with still. So
can I add something? We is the curatorial team.
Yeah, sorry.
Which is part of the team. We are 6 right now, and so these 6 curators invited I think 5 other people to form a jury, and so we selected the projects. And also this curatorial team doesn't act as like the mastermind of these biennales, as you probably figured out by now, but we always have our own contributions. So actually there are some projects that didn't come through the open call but were initiated by the curatorial team. Like Roma Muma would be one example that we initiated in collaboration with ERIAC, which is a Berlin-based Institute for Roma Arts and Culture. And also Transperiphery is a project conceived by Eszter Szakács, who is a member of the curatorial team, together with a critical geographer, Zoltán Ginelli. So there are these, always there are, like, we look at what we got through the open call, and if we feel that something's missing, or obviously we also have our creative sides as curators, so we kind of add to it. And another, I think there is another important part, that we didn't have the title obviously when we selected these projects, so we looked at them and then started thinking, like, what would be a frame, what would be a kind of intellectual discursive frame that could connect all these different interests that the artists presented or curators presented. And my colleague Katalin Székely, who also actually came up with Gaudiopolis a couple of years ago, so she came up with this poem, and the title of the poem, which in Hungarian is actually like a breath of air. That's the translation of the title, but we felt that in English it doesn't work that well. It doesn't sound like a demand or an exclamation, so that's why we chose Inhale. So the title came already after the selection process, and it was inspired by the projects that we selected.
So I would open up to the audience. Are there questions or comments that you have? You can either use the chat and we will read out your question, or you just raise your hand. Yes, Livia?
Yeah. I have a question in regard to the whole legal structure also, what type of legal body do you have? Because I'm wondering, I mean, in Hungary, there have been lots of raids of NGOs and civil organizations. And I mean, you have a very political agenda and very openly. So I'm wondering, is there some risk of doing this biennale? And also how do you reach an audience that is like diverse, also like connected with the fact that there are very few oppositional like radio stations or like newspapers? So yeah, how do you manage to reach a big audience also?
Answering your first question, after the first edition of the Biennale, we established our own association. So the first edition was actually realized with the help of a foundation that was basically inactive and was kind of resurrected for this purpose. But when we decided to continue, we founded our own association that has 10 members, which is the required minimum, and basically just a legal body behind the project that gives us possibility to apply. And we fell under the category of kind of infamous category of civil organizations subsidized from abroad, which is its own legal category by now, established by the government a couple of years ago. It's one way of stigmatizing civil organizations that work internationally and accept international funding, and also make it more difficult to use such funding. So basically, once you reach 24,000 euros per year got from abroad, which is really not a big amount, you have to register officially at court that you are a civil organization subsidized from abroad, and you have to declare yourself as such in every printed and online publication, basically every public utterance, which we actually do like very proudly. We kind of over-identify with this category because we are super proud that we can bring so much international money into the Hungarian art scene. So yeah, that's like the legal background. Nicola, do you want to answer the communication question? How to reach a public?
Yeah, so it's already the third. Well, so it's already the third edition, so we can build on the public of the previous two. By the time we initiated the first edition, it was still in 2015. So there were other ways of communication widely more open than they have these days. So the media landscape was a bit less narrow than these. So the brand was communicated good enough to keep people's attention, and in the current edition, we of course use those forms of communication what are available. So we have a media relation with that part of the news, mostly online ones that are still available. We also have professional relations to quite a number of platforms. We have so the very limited means which are available we use, and we have quite an extended network to work with us.
And I would also say that that creating our own content has become key. So as Nicola said, in the first edition, we could still count on the kind of traditional media and media campaign. But by now, our social media activity has become far more important. And basically, we create a lot of own content, videos, podcasts, very strong visual identity, stories, and certainly the future is in this direction. So we have to move toward the online communication, obviously, and creating our own content and also our own network. So right now the plan is to build heavily on our professional connections and make them part of our online campaign. So if you like our post, you can also share them and comment them, and look out for our opening day online activity as well, because that's also kind of like part of that strategy, or uses that strategy. So yeah, that's it. You have to create your own media basically, and your own channels in order to communicate effectively.
So as you mentioned, online communication, and Nicolette just briefly mentioned that you might also transfer part of the program to the digital space. Maybe you could just briefly go into how you deal with the actual situation that is difficult, as you mentioned before, and that is unclear if you can. If exhibitions can take place in this situation right now in 1 month. So how do you deal with this current situation?
It seems now that we will be able to open the exhibitions due to the fact that they are not state-run or municipally funded institutions. So, but like empty shops or private venues. So, of course, taking care of the actual lockdown regulation, like the limited numbers of visitors, and wearing masks and fertilizing and so on. But it seems that it will be possible to open the exhibitions. What is not possible, to organize the public programs in indoor spaces, because it's it would goes against all rationality of this pandemic situation. So that's why we decided to make this kind of hybrid forms and having the exhibitions offline. If we can still make it, hopefully we will be able. And the discursive programs, either the discursive programs basically online, and the third part, the public events, like the performances and this event with the choir and so on. These hopefully could be organized on public space by the beginning of the biennial, or this is what we hope for. Of course, the situation might change from day to day, but we have quite a number of scenarios that we can adapt to.
Yeah, Dorothee?
Yeah, hello, Dorothee Frank from Austria, right now near the border, near Sopron. I mean, as for us, for Ben, Jura, and me, we will find a way to travel and not having to quarantine. But in general, do you expect that you can welcome foreign guests not having to quarantine, or when they go back? Of course, it's impossible to predict. But do you have some support or some status for visitors so that they are kind of professional visitors or something? I mean. Towards the Hungarian authorities?
No, I mean, we don't really count on a large international presence, obviously. We can't go around the regulations, and the situation is really not very pleasant here in Hungary right now. But actually, we see the increase of online presence of art events as an opportunity, because we've always been a very low budget project, and now that a Zoom conference has become normal, which wasn't the case just like a year ago. I mean, a little more than a year ago, it wasn't like normal. So now it opens up a whole new world for us, basically, where we can invite speakers and colleagues from all over the world, and we can expect an audience from all over the world. So we try to look at it as an opportunity, and this is why our communication is also going into that direction, that we try to gain these people for the moment online. And the exhibitions, well, even the exhibitions that we plan to present in the physical space, most of them will have some kind of online presence. For example, ACLIM, this agency for the climate imagination, they will have their own website, as an agency should have its own website, right? So you will be able to find quite a lot of information, not only on our website, but also project websites on the various projects, and also all of them will create an online guided tour which is another way to kind of look around even if you are not present physically. So we try to kind of create as full picture as possible of the events online, and still create the possibility for the local audience to have some kind of physical experience as well.
And also the majority of the online events will be held in English or subtitled, as the case of the guided tours. So there are quite a number of possibilities where you can follow.
Yeah. I mean, if people are coming, you know, it's going to be like a really nice surprise. Usually we do guided tours for international guests because it's quite difficult to navigate. These are not institutions, right? These venues that we have. So this year we haven't put much energy into that yet because it's not very likely. But if the need arises, we'll be certainly ready to help the international visitors to kind of find their ways and make the most of their time.
So maybe looking beyond this year's edition, you also mentioned the future plans and also international collaborations as a very strong perspective for developing also what OFF-Biennale now is as a structure, as an infrastructure. So how would you go forward with planning the next edition in also connected to those plans? So you mentioned that you will be present at Documenta. So what are the long-term perspectives for OFF-Biennale? Also taking into account what you mentioned before, the new political situation with the municipality, which also sounds interesting in a way.
Yeah. We really need the time to sit down after we opened the Biennale and kind of start like strategically and consistently talk about these issues. But obviously we are already in the middle of thinking about Documenta and our contribution. So it's a very small team and we can't really pay attention to like various things at the same time. So we try to kind of have some of these kind of streams of collaborations and bring them as long as we can. The Trans-Periphery movement project will be also presented in another chapter, the next chapter of it in the Kiev Biennale this fall, because the whole Kiev Biennale will be a collaboration between this newly formed partnership of the East Europe Biennial Alliance. So our contribution, I mean, of Biennale's contribution will be the Trans-Periphery movement, as that project has been found as a common interest among the partners. So for Documenta, I really don't want to speak about it yet because everything is so undecided and fluid, but certainly some of the projects that we've started this, for this edition years ago, will have some kind of appearance in our Documenta contribution. And also our idea for the next OFF-Biennale, which will take place maybe 1 year, maybe just a few months after Documenta, we definitely will do like a version of our contribution, or like we'll try to bring some of Documenta back to Budapest. Because, well, simply we won't have a possibility for anything else, but also because we find it very important to kind of relocate some of those projects and ideas to our context. So it won't be just, you know, like a canned project kind of put back to Budapest, but the idea would be to kind of develop them further for a Budapest presentation. Not necessarily only our contributions, but perhaps also some of the collaborations that was initiated by another partner, another Lumbung organization. So yeah, we have our hands full for the next 2-3 years. It's super exciting.
Yeah, and the potential collaboration with the municipalities, it's still an open question yet. So just the political situation in Budapest in this term changed quite significantly last November when the election happened, and now we have a mayor from the oppositional side who is much more supportive towards those values and ideas that we also represent. So this gives us a hope, but we decided not to run towards it and not to hug this possibility too quickly, because we would just give some time to see how this system will operate and whether those values are really the ones they represent. So we just take our time, but this might happen, you know, it's not a decision for the sake of its own that we do not collaborate with state or municipal institution. So it's not for the sake of this statement. It's to avoid those compromises and not to take side of those political ones that are too far from our ideas. But if politics change, then we might also change our politics.
Well, yeah, our independence and that the project was actually built up and established independently, I think is super important, that we didn't start by being supported by any of these bodies. So that was actually part of the strategy, even if we only realized it retrospectively a little bit. But you know, the fact that we were able to establish such an internationally visible, kind of renowned project without any of governmental help creates a different position for us. Mm-hmm. But the grim reality is actually that since these municipal elections in 2019, the government has also systematically kind of divested into these oppositional municipalities, and the Corona crisis furthered this difficulty. So I think if until now we took our time to see, you know, how it plays out, now we will be forced to take our time, because none of these municipalities are in a situation that would, I think, allow them to really invest into contemporary art in the near future. So we'll see. But you know, even if even an administrative collaboration can help a lot.
No, I was also thinking of your very strong position within the independent art scene. That could be also, you know, a very important representation of a specific approach to cultural work within a local political context.
Yeah, so being established independently and sustaining the thing with various sources gives an independence that won't be lost just because we have some kind of collaboration with the municipality. So this independence that we established is based on a financial structure that kind of that is very diverse. So we don't have a major sponsor, which would make our life much easier if there was like a 5-year collaboration with some big corporation that provides like the 60 or 70% of our budget. That would be, you know, very easy. But then that would also give us the possibility to them to really shape the Biennale if they wanted to. So our financial portfolio is also very diverse in the sense that no one gives enough money to really have like an idea of having any impact or, you know, control over what we do. So it's a lot of like small amounts of money from many sources. That's the model for now.
So are there any other questions from the audience? Because we are nearing the end of our time, but I still want to give you the opportunity and see.
Yeah. Friday evening.
Friday evening, long day.
I'm very grateful that you stayed there.
No, we are so grateful for your presentations, for your time, for your engaging presentation that you gave us, and of course also for the project that you initiated. So it's a very It's a very impressive reference also for us. So thank you so much, Heinalka and Nicolette, for this evening's lecture. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining us, for listening, and also for posing questions. For the ones who are with us in the SEM course, we will see each other tomorrow morning at 10 and have another opportunity to talk to you too in the course. So I'm just wishing you a very pleasant and relaxing rest of the evening, and thank you again for being here with us. Thank you.